So for me, sports has been a part of my life since I can remember. Ever since I was probably could walk, I had a ball in my hands or at my feet, and I did everything growing up here in Greenville, from swim team to basketball, softball, baseball, and obviously soccer. My parents, though, were both into sports when they were growing up. My dad played multiple sports in high school. My mom actually played college softball at the University of North Carolina. So I think through them, and then just growing up, sports was just what we did and part of our life, and it's always been a part of who I am. Soccer obviously became the sport that I was most passionate about. It just stuck more than the other ones. And when I got into high school at J.L. Mann, I think I was a sophomore, and I realized that that was the sport I wanted to pursue, and it became my sole focus. I made a goal, I wanted to play college soccer. And the minute I decided to do that, that was kind of it for me. I did everything that I could. Extra training, was out at the field every night of the week. And my junior year, I got multiple schools to give me an offer, Clemson and USC. That's what my decision came down to. And I chose USC. I think the biggest reason, even though at the time the program was like average at best, I mean, they were fighting tooth and nail every year to just make the conference tournament, which the top 8 teams make. So they weren't in the greatest of places at the time, but I felt like they were an emerging program, and they really wanted me there, and I felt I could play a significant role in helping to build that. The idea of creating a winning mentality and building that type of culture really tugged at my heartstrings, and so that's the reason I went there. And to be honest, my 4 years at USC were nothing short of that. My sophomore year, I was named captain. I was only 17 years old, had no idea what I was doing. Kind of just ran with it. But had a great sophomore year. I was actually named SEC Defensive Player of the Year. And then went on, I was a 3-time, or 4-time, I guess, All-SEC performer. I was a 3-time All-American. But I think the biggest thing that I take from my college career is more than just the accomplishments, is what we did collectively. You know, my class came in as a freshman group, and we kind of just amongst ourselves decided, you know, before we graduate, we want to win a championship. That was just our goal. And my senior year, we did that. We won the SEC. We actually made it to the Elite 8 of the NCAA tournament, which were both things that, yeah, thank you. Definitely, those were program first by a long shot. And I think as I look back, that's the greatest thing I took from my college career. I was fortunate enough to have a great senior season as well, and then was asked kind of unexpectedly to come to a couple combines for the Pro League. And a couple months after that, I was actually drafted in the Pro League here. I was the first pick in the 3rd round by the Atlanta Beat, which was the pro team out of Atlanta at the time. And I decided to go all in on that opportunity. I actually dropped out of school to go down to Atlanta and pursue that. You know, I wanted to give it all I could, and it was a great experience for me. It was a huge transition, obviously, when you go from the college locker room to the professional ranks, but it was cool for me to be close to home and be able to experience that. I went back to school that fall and graduated. I got my degree, and the next 6 months I spent as the volunteer assistant at USC. I stayed with my team and my coaches there, and you know, that was a time in my life that I was really seeking for what I was going to do next. I didn't really have it kind of pinpointed. There's a couple different avenues I was looking into, but to be honest, soccer, or like playing professionally in another team, was kind of not on my radar at all. I had given my soccer resume to this contact that I met through my coaches early in the spring, and then I honestly didn't think much about it after that. But 2 months later, I get a random call from him, and he's like, "Hey, just FYI, you might get a call from this team." I was like, "Okay, where?" And he's like, "They're in the Netherlands." And I was like, "Okay." Looking that up. And you know, that's one of those things. I graduated with international business. That was my degree. I always loved traveling. That's another thing I did as a kid that my parents instilled in me that just always intrigued me. I loved seeing new cultures, seeing new places. So playing overseas was like kind of in the back of my mind. But it's one of those things when the call comes, like my stomach dropped. And I'm like, wait, really? But they also gave me 2 days to answer them. So after the initial kind of shock, though, I, of course, was going to say yes. It was just one of those things I would regret if I didn't do. So 2 months later, I'm on a plane flying across the ocean to the Netherlands, a Obviously different country, different culture. I don't speak the language. I don't know a single person there. So to say I was nervous would be an understatement for sure. But I was definitely excited about the adventure. I'll tell you this story though, I hadn't even been there a week. And we're in our first scrimmage. We drove to this field like in the middle of nowhere. And mind you, I came from the US where the game of soccer in general is just entirely different. It's a very direct game, so the ball's in the air a lot, it's kicked and chased, a lot more athleticism, physicality. The Dutch play a game of more precision, possession, the ball's on the ground all the time, and it doesn't leave the ground a lot. So, and I played center defender, so I'm in the back line in the middle, and I get the ball in this scrimmage. We are not much into this game, maybe 5 minutes, and I pass the ball out to my left back. It goes to her feet, but she turns around in the middle of the game and screams at me and just says, "Play it to me harder, and play it to my left foot," like screams it at me. And I just remember thinking, I am not in South Carolina anymore. And this is gonna be way more challenging than maybe I thought, but I spent about 2.5 years in total overseas, and it was an amazing experience. I played in Moscow, in Spain, in France, in Germany, in Belgium. I stood in the Red Square. And I went to a game at Camp Nou, which is the stadium for the Barcelona men's team, which is one of the best teams in the world. And it was at this time that I was over there that I really started to see that soccer was much more than a game. Without this sport, I wouldn't be able to do the things I'm doing and see the things I was seeing, and it was taking me all over the world. And I really started to soak that in. And I had been in the Netherlands almost a year, and it was coming up on re-signing day. I was going to contract re-signing, and I was 100% going to resign. There was like no doubt. I was loving my experience. I was all in. And that was on a Wednesday. 2 days prior to that, on Monday, was the day after Easter. I'll never forget it because that's the day everything changed drastically for me. It was the semifinal game for our cup, which was our championship. And we drove to this field in the south part of the country, and it was spitting rain, which, shocker, it rained every day. I was in the Netherlands, I felt like. But so most of the fields we played on were turf. This AstroTurf, this happened to be a grass field for whatever reason. And I remember walking out on the field, this is before warm-ups. I'm just with a couple teammates and just kind of, scouting out the field and stuff. And I had 2 different cleats on. I had my cleats that I always wore, my normal cleats, and then I had on a pair of stud cleats, which are like metal studs at the bottom that usually athletes would wear like if it's bad weather, because it gives you more traction and stuff like that. So I hardly ever wore those cleats, but that day I decided to wear them. And about 15 minutes into the game, again, I'm playing defender, and my midfielder in front of me passes the ball across the field. It gets intercepted by a girl on the other team, and she's dribbling at me now, full speed. Like, breakaway, I am retreating. I don't want to fall off the stage, but I am full speed backpedaling, trying to keep the girl in front of me. She has the ball on her right foot, and we get to the top of the box, which is that white 18-yard box, right outside the goal. The goalkeeper's behind me, and she cuts the ball across from her right foot to her left foot, and I'm with her, and I plant with my left foot, something I've done hundreds of thousands of times in my career, but this time my foot sticks in the ground, I twist and turn. I feel my knee twist, and I fall to the ground, and I try to get up, right? I'm like, the girl can't score, so I try to get up, fall right back to the ground, and I was fortunate enough not to have many injuries in my career, but I knew in that moment something was not right, and I got helped off the field, and I remember being on the sidelines, and I vividly remember thinking to myself, I am like 5,000 miles away from home, and I think I just tore my ACL. And sure enough, that's what happened. I ended up coming back to the States and doing my rehab and my surgery here, but I didn't want to end my career on that. I was like 100% certain that I was going to do whatever it took to try and get back. And fortunately, Ryan, who I didn't even know you were going to be here, side note, he is the one who helped me with my ACL rehab. So I moved back here, worked with him to do that, and as most of the athletes and some of y'all have said tonight, the mental aspect of recovery is definitely the hardest. And I remember those doubts of like, am I going to be the player I was before? Can I play at a high level again? I don't know. But the motivation to not end my career on the injury was enough for me. And a couple months later, it had been about almost a year from the surgery, but a couple months after training, I did get an opportunity to go back to Sweden. So a team in Sweden contacted me and needed a player at my position, and I went over there for the second half of the year, and it was an amazing experience. The league there was actually better than what I experienced before. I was playing against some of the best players in the world that played on national teams from Brazil and Argentina and all over the world. So to me, that was really, really, really cool and special to be able to play against some of those types of players. Towards the end of that season, it was now like beginning of November time, and it was 2 games left. So we're in the second to last game. We flew up to this team in the northern part of Sweden, and it was the farthest north I had ever been. As far as I'm concerned, I was like in the northern lights. It was freezing cold, and it was the second half of the game, and things were going all right, and then the game ended early for me again, but this time for a totally different reason. So a girl on the other team gets the ball, she's dribbling towards the goal again, almost on a breakaway, and I know this girl's faster than me. Like, if we get in a foot race, I'm screwed. So I gotta make like a split-second decision, and I leave my feet and slide, right? So I'm gonna try and win the ball from her. The problem is I get her and not the ball, and that's totally illegal. So I get my first and last red card of my career, right? So I turn around, sure enough, the ref holds up the card, and so I'm ejected from the game. I gotta leave the field immediately, go to the locker room, and I also have to sit out the next game, which is the last game of our season. And so a week goes by, we're at the next game, last game, and I'm sitting, not on my bench, but up on the sideline on the other side of the field, in this like little press box area, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm frustrated that I'm not out on the field, right? But as I'm watching, I'm thinking back, and the 2 weeks prior to that, leading up to that game, I remember thinking, man, like going to training and practice didn't feel the same. I've never had to like motivate myself to go train, but I was finding myself having to do that, and I couldn't really understand why at the time. But as I started to watch, my team play, it all started to make sense to me. I never wanted to be that player that had the game really ripped away from them, or played longer than they should have. But I never thought my career would end this way. I mean, I was 25 years old. I had played soccer for 22 years. It had literally been my life. As these guys know, it's every day grinding for that long. But as I watched the game, I just had this weird peace about me. And I had all the memories from the time I was a little girl playing, through each stage of my career kind of flashing through my mind. And, I just remember thinking as the final minutes went on that I was ready. Not to quit on soccer, but to transition away from playing to whatever the game would give me next. Because I was fairly certain that the experiences that I had had were amazing. And there was value and lesson in those things that could be imparted to the next generation. And so I kept that in the back of my mind, and if we fast forward a couple years, I met a good friend of mine who shared that passion with me. And she and I started a business together called 1111 Training, which we run here out of Greenville. We started in 2016 together, and it's a supplemental soccer training facility for girls. And for me, though, it's so much more than that. It's really a platform that I get to impart the things I learned onto these girls so that when they face challenges down the road, they're ready for them, and that I can also motivate them and push them to do things they never thought they could do, like play overseas. And I'll leave you with one quick story. It was a couple months after we started the business. This girl came in to meet with me, and I found out after the fact it was more like her mom dragged her to come meet with me. She was in a place where she really hated soccer, the sport that she used to love, and she was not very confident at all in herself. And I remember meeting with her and just really trying to encourage her and say, hey, look, you're a really good player, and you have so much more that you can experience through the sport, and so much more you can still do, and just try to get her to come and train just once. For whatever reason, she listened, and she showed up the next week to train, and then she came the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that, and she just kept coming. Slowly but surely, she got more confident, got better at the sport, and a year and a half after that, she committed to play college soccer. And she committed to Slippery Rock, which is a Division II school up in Pennsylvania. And she just finished her freshman fall season, and she came home over winter break. And I remember her running up to me and meeting with me, and she's like, Blakely, I had my evaluation with my coach, and she told me that I had the best attitude of anybody on the team. And for me, that's what it's all about. That's what soccer did for me. It wasn't about wins and losses or accomplishments. Those are great, but it's about who I became because of the sport, because of soccer. And now I'm back in Greenville, in the community I grew up in, and I get to give back in that way. And to me, that's more special than anything I did on the field. So thank you for listening. That's my story.